think it's safe to say we could all use some tips that helps deal with the overstimulation and oftentimes chaos of our daily lives. I oftentimes think about simple living the most during what feels like the most busy, stressful days or weeks of my life. Either because I remember how much I appreciate it, not to mention need it for my own sanity. Some of the tips I'm going to share today have helped me really just step back and enjoy daily life at its core with some of the simplest of pleasures. Here's some tips for simple living. But first, if you're new to my channel, thank you for stopping by. Here we talk about minimalism, frugal living, tech, and things of that nature. So if that sounds good to you and you end up liking the video, be sure to like and please lay siege to the subscribe button. Let's get started. Read fiction. I'm actually going to touch on this again in a future video, but I really believe reading fiction books is one of the simplest but most enjoyable activities to engage in. Admittedly, a lot of the time it's very difficult for me to force myself to grab a book and actually sit down and start reading, but once I do, it's always so rewarding and I'm always just so immersed in the story. A tip that actually worked for me, and it works a lot for me with TV shows as well, is to just give yourself the first chapter or maybe the first few pages to just completely open your mind and buy into the story. I've noticed, for me at least, this helps me get a little bit more immersed in the story and forget about the world outside of these pages, which is why I'm doing it in the first place. Most of you guys know I'm a huge Game of Thrones fan and super deep into the lore. So if you've actually read the books and enjoy them or just like the show, I highly recommend Fire and Blood. Or if you're just looking for a good fantasy to get immersed in, if you can keep up with the very complicated family tree, I highly recommend it. Depending on the genre of fiction, I personally like high fantasy. It really helps with escaping the loud brain rot that plagues our phone and pretty much everywhere we go. I highly recommend picking up a fiction book one of these days because you might be a person who actually ends up loving to read. Try a sport or outdoor activity. You may have seen some B-roll in my videos over the years of me skateboarding or even playing basketball or volleyball. It's definitely not because I'm good at any of these, on the contrary actually. But I'm 100% serious when I say, aside from reading fiction, getting lost in a sport or some sort of physical activity, even if you're new or suck, is one of the simplest ways to unplug or turn a bad day around. By the way, if there's anyone in Palm Beach County who plays basketball or pickleball or volleyball, please reach out to me because my crew is heavily unreliable. I think what's so great about this is, just like reading, it's so simple to get immersed in. And once you get over that initial fear of trying something out new, you find it's not so bad and most people are willing to help out beginners. Delete social medias and brain rot. I've made videos in the past talking about my experiences deleting social media, and although I've flirted with the idea of making an Instagram again, I ultimately didn't, and I'm glad I didn't. I'm guilty of watching nonsense videos on YouTube, but if you're watching TikTok, I'm begging you to just delete it and give life a chance without that on your phone. I'm aware YouTube has its own horrible corner of videos, but TikTok is in a league of its own. Not existing on platforms like Instagram or Facebook leaves me with less things to check, not to mention less places I can be reached, which I'm sure sounds nice to a lot of people watching. I would say at the very least, give yourself a period where you delete these apps from your devices to keep yourself from checking for notifications and seeing how much time you gain and headache you save yourself from. Have a 30-minute buffer waking up and before going to bed. What I'm specifically talking about is a 30-minute buffer without checking any of your electronic devices or any sort of work. It's actually crazy how much better my mornings are when I'm not reaching for my phone right away or checking emails moments after opening my eyes. And I really don't know why I do this in the first place. Because unless I see a notification for $1 million deposit in my bank account, I can guarantee there's nothing in there that can't wait a little while. And this 30-minute buffer is rather short. I would say the longer you can go, the better, especially in the mornings over the evenings. Because I'm still very guilty of checking my phone up until a few moments before going to sleep. But considering how much of a difference it's made in the mornings, I can almost guarantee I would feel the same way at nighttime. Limit tasks to 3 a day. And I think even the busiest of people can give this a shot. If I had a list of every single thing I had to do throughout the day, it would easily be between 10 and 20 things to do, some much more important than others. But I noticed that by cutting down to the few most important things, They get more attention and are never left unfinished. This really goes back to that facade that thinking busier means more productive. And speaking for myself, that usually left me feeling overwhelmed and underproductive. When I'm actually planning my week out or my days out individually, I will literally make a checklist for each day with the 3 most important things I have to get done each day and simply check them off as I go. While this obviously in the end makes me more productive, it does what I'm ultimately trying to achieve, and that is to live a little bit more simply. Practice silent days or hours. And this might just be elaborating a little bit on limiting brain rot, but in what I would consider a much more approachable way. When I consider how much throughout the day I'm listening to or watching something sort of in the background of whatever I'm doing, it's nearly 100% of the time. I've decided to put into practice a few hours collectively or some specific activities where I'm not listening to or engaging in anything in the background of whatever I'm doing. This just means if I'm straightening up, there's no music or videos playing in the background. And a much more challenging example of this would be my silent commute. Because yes, driving in total silence is as depressing as it sounds, but in its own way, it was actually sort of peaceful. This will really be a test to see how much you're reaching for your phone to turn on some noise in the background. I know it was for me. And an even better way to address it and ultimately make that change. These are just some of the things I've been trying to aggressively commit to as of lately to live a little bit more simply. I really hope some of these things prove to be as valuable to you as they were for me. And if you take anything from this video, at the very least, try not checking your phone for a little while in the morning. I promise that's probably been the most helpful for me. Anyways, as always, I appreciate the time you spent here and I appreciate you watching. If you did like this video and you like this type of content, be sure to like and consider subscribing to my channel, and I'll see you next time.